Hello, this is your host Todd Lewis of the Praise of Folly podcast. Tonight is the AAR for the stream that happened 2 weeks ago. The debate, is Catholicism harmful to the good of the nations? Hopefully, Distributus will be able to join us tonight. So we'll start with you, Virgilius. Why don't you give us your thoughts on your performance in the debate?
Well, my performance on the debate was personally shameful, I would think. Because I've had better debates, I think, where my tongue does not trip so much, where my memory does not fail me so much like in that time, because I certainly know that I could have brought up many good historical examples to counter the questioning of Dave and little things like that. I certainly was passionately engaged or compromised rather in the debate, but I would not accuse Dave because he's not here. I don't know. I don't like to talk on someone's back, so I would say that the failure was mine to succumb to my passions and get angry by the end of the debate. I would also think I should maybe apologize because it was not good manners to be scoffing at whatever I was scoffing towards.
Oh. Yeah. So is that all you have to say for now, Rex?
A final note, I mean, Dave is already here. I think he succeeded more on discrediting rather than disproving my points.
Okay.
Hello.
Yeah. Hey, Dave. So I usually start off by asking people how they thought they performed in the debate. So how do you think your performance was?
I don't know if I understood the debate format, because usually like competitive debates are a little bit more formatted. So
yeah, they're normally Oxford style. I'll probably do that in the future.
Well, I don't know. I mean, like, I assumed that he was putting forward the affirmative, so I essentially just interrogated that.
Well, he was doing that, but I guess more specifically though, in hindsight, in your performance, how do you think you performed, and where do you think you might have done better?
Oh, I don't know. I guess maybe I should have spent more time enumerating the things that the Catholic Church did well. I think I only enumerated really one thing the Catholic Church did well, and that was facilitating over the longest era of ethnic stability inside Europe, which has classically been an incredibly unstable place ethnically.
Okay. Yeah.
But I think I could have plowed through numerous other benefits that the Catholic Church has given to Europe. But as it stood, I probably spent more time going on the negative than I should have.
Okay. Yeah, because looking at the debate, I would say, I think it was about an hour. So I'd say probably the first 20 minutes, Dave, you started off strong with the reference to the national identities of Europe being rooted in the Catholic Church. Like you could point to like Alfred the Great in England or Charlemagne for the France and Germany and things like that. So that's making the connection in contradistinction to the proposition. Now, one of the things that could have gotten you in trouble is that the claim that Europe was most stable in the Middle Ages, that's not the case. It's the 19th century after Napoleon, and then more recently after World War II. From 19.
No, I said. I'm afraid perhaps this didn't come across, but that was not my claim. My claim was that Europe during its Christian era, and I specifically laid out between 900 and 1900, was the most ethnically stable it had been any time, either compared to the 20th century or compared any time before the Christian era in 700 AD. And I definitely stand by that statement because I think it's demonstrably true through genetics.
So by ethnically stable, you mean lack of displacement?
I mean that if I took a person from Normandy in 1000 AD, they would be more genetically related to somebody in 1900 than likely somebody would be if I took a person from Normandy excuse me, if I took a person from Normandy in say 300 BC and compared them to someone in Normandy in 580.
Okay. Now,
and that's what I mean by ethnic stability. And I imagine that give ourselves 100 more years, I don't think people living in France will be as ethnically related to people living in France a few hundred years before them, given the current immigration trends.
Okay, as they stand now. So that was that particular claim you were making. Now, I think the other thing that was another misstep was that if that one even was, given the clarification on the claim that you made, is that, you know, how is like what is a principle? I mean, isn't that kind of like when Sargon said, "What is white?"
Well, I don't know. What do you mean, what is a principle? I guess my difficulty was that it seemed that the Catholic Church was being critiqued from a standard. I didn't even understand the standard. The standard seemed to be nationalism, but then it was really unclear what the definition of nation was, considering that it seemed like Virgilius wanted to say that medieval Europe fared worse on this standard than the ancient world, but we never got to a definition of nationalism by which that critique was true.
Mm-hmm. So when you were making the claim, now when you guys were arguing at the end about...
Oh, guys, give me 1 second.
Yeah, sure. Well, okay. So I guess, Virex, what are some of your thoughts on that so far?
Well, for example, when he asked me what is a principle, that thankfully he made then another question, because that is unanswerable. I mean, what the hell? But it was in the context of Republican principles, because we were talking that, no, he asked me that if I liked or I preferred any form of government in antiquity, and I said, yes, the Roman Republic. And then we went on, and Dave said that basically the Roman Republic created the Roman Empire. So maybe there was some equivocation on what the Roman Republic is as abstractly.
I stand by this, and it is absolutely historically true.
Okay,
the Roman Republic is the expansion of Rome.
Dave, that's as facile as saying the Catholic Church made up Luther or the Tsar gave us Lenin.
What? No, I mean,
because one followed the other.
By empire, do you mean the territorial possessions of Rome, or do you mean the system of government of essential despotism that proceeded from the Roman emperors? Because that is where the confusion lie. Right?
Yeah, you see, I did say that it was some equivocation. So obviously, when I am talking about the Roman Republic, it's not just this physical thing. It is a political entity. A political entity obviously has some principles, a guiding principle of
okay,
any political entity.
I asked a very simple question, and I'm getting a very complicated answer.
Because
empire,
that's
do you mean the territorial possessions of Rome, or do you mean the system of government?
No, he means...
If it's a system of government, then Todd's counter critique is accurate.
Yeah,
but I was not talking about the system of government. I was talking about the territorial possessions of the Roman state.
Well, that's what I meant with equivocation. It can be two things. It can be the land, the extension, or it can be the principles which guide it.
Which do you mean?
I mean, for example, the principles of the Roman Republic were certainly different from the principles of the Roman Empire.
How is it so hard to answer this insanely simple question? What are we talking about? Are we talking about the system of government called the empire, aka political power wielded through the figurehead of a single military, in most cases, military leader? Or are we talking about the literal possessions of the Roman state?
When you're talking about the
question
of empire,
what do you mean?
Empire is indissociable. It is indissociable.
I definitely don't assert the other. Todd is absolutely right that I cannot very well say that the institution of the emperor as the political governance system of the Roman Empire was a product of the Republic. And that was not my point. But I absolutely maintain that the system of government called the Roman Republic was what drove the territorial expansion of the state of Rome. And I have numerous historians that back me up on that. As a matter of fact, almost all historians will tell you the same thing.
Okay, so let me answer that. So the principles, I judge them on success, And many times, historically, success in a state comes with military expansion. And that is in any state, on any time, everywhere. A successful state will sometimes expand.
So the expansion of the Roman state was driven by the Roman Republic, right?
Well, yeah, I think so.
Yes, that is what I meant.
But you said
and it was
that
difficult because it seemed to say that states that expanded like that, expanded over multiple peoples and ethnicities and grew to incorporate them, were a bad thing. And that's what I didn't understand, because if you say that you have to acknowledge that the Republic drove that process.
So, Virgilius, Dave's question is, are you talking about a form of government, or are you talking about an expensive land? I take it you're speaking about a form of government, right, Virgilius?
Okay, rephrase it.
When you talk about the Republic, Dave meant, do you mean the empire, rather? Do you mean the type of government, i.e., the Republic was betrayed to the central dictatorship of the Caesars, or do you mean the empire as an extension of territory governed by a power?
No, the first one.
Okay, the first one, the principle betrayed to the Caesars. So you go from representative government to the Caesars. That's what he meant by Republican empire.
Okay, but so the thing is so the form of power, I think that is legitimate to say that, okay, we can distinguish between the Republic of Rome. My question was that you have this concept of sovereign nationhood, right? But I guess, what does it mean to have sovereign nationhood if you have an expansive state that covers an area as large as the Republic did before Augustus Caesar?
Very simple, because if you compare the classical age and the feudal age, we have empires that rule over different peoples. Just at in the medieval age, you don't see ethnical national prerogatives as you did in the classical age.
So that's what I disputed. I directly disputed that. Did the Persian Empire have a national? What is national prerogative? It was very unclear to me what national prerogative even meant.
Okay, well, hold on. We're not here to relitigate the debate.
Okay,
I want to ask.
Maybe you could help me out, because my problem during the debate is the same as my problem here, is that I just don't understand what critique is even being made, because the terminology being used seems to be constantly shifting.
Okay, I want to ask Decadent here. What are some of your thoughts on the debate, what's been said here, so you can get a chance to interact with Dave before he has to leave?
Yeah, hold on a second.
Okay.
All right, I'm back. So you asked me what exactly?
Yeah, what were your thoughts on the debate? And then is there anything you'd like to ask Dave while he's still here before he has to leave at 6?
Well, I do agree with Dave that he certainly should have expanded on some points, especially some of his historical points. And I didn't. I was quite surprised by. I think Praise and Verge are wrong in thinking, oh, when he asked what is a principle, he specifically meant what does Virgilius define as a principle, instead of being like Sargon and like what is white. He wasn't. I don't think he was being.
I was not
like that.
I was not asking what is a principle generally. I was asking what is the principle that Virgilius is using to evaluate the ancient world as being good and the feudal world as being bad.
Right, and I also and you mentioned briefly that the Western civilization was ethnically stable, or ethically, like as in morally. Ethnically
stable. I mean, the genetics. Yeah, like, and I'll restate the standard again. If you were to take a person who was living in France at around 800 or 900 AD, they would be genetically very similar to the people who fought in Verdun in World War I. Whereas if you take the people fighting in World War I, they will be increasingly less similar to the people living in France now because of the high immigration rates. And if you took somebody living in France in 300 BC, they would be probably very ethnically different than the people living in France in 780. So if we took similar time frame jumps, we would see an incredible amount of genetic stability, meaning that there weren't a lot of populations getting wiped out or moved around, even though the political orders were moving between 8 or 900 AD and 1900 AD.
So
which is
you
a period. It's a very long time for populations to be that stable.
So you do admit that that ethnically and culturally Western civilization was stable, but you do admit that politically it certainly had its chaotic periods.
Oh yeah. But my case, and I mentioned this during the debate, was that Christian Europe essentially allowed, because it had sort of a more political view of a nation that wasn't ethnic, it allowed a lot of the conflicts that would necessarily have to go on between political entities to be fought out among political classes and not to result in necessary ethnic cleansings the way they many times did in the ancient world, and the way they essentially did under the Islamic caliphates many times, which is why if you go look at Egypt, which during a similar period, right? Look at France in 800 AD. It's the same genetics as there were in Verdun. But if you go to Egypt, most of the people 800 AD in Egypt were Coptic Christians. 1900 AD, most of them are Arab Muslims. Totally different genetics, totally different culture. The people of those ancient breeds were essentially wiped out, moved due to conflicts necessarily having to be ethnic and not being fundamentally political in nature, which I consider a good development. I do not like the idea of people getting wiped out because the politics of the country change. I don't think that's a civilized way of doing warfare.
I think this is actually a key point here, where what would have made this debate much better is if we had a agreed upon shared set of terms beforehand. Because the way you're framing it, Dave, it sounds like you think Virgilius Rex is arguing from an alt-right perspective, where ethnic stability or ethnic purity is the desired goal, but he's not arguing from that perspective, and that's part of the confusion.
I don't care about purity. I care about stability because I think it's an indicator of civilization.
No, but that's not relevant to the criticism that he was making.
I don't know what the standard was, which is why that was my main confusion. And that's why I asked what the principle was, because I spent most of the debate struggling to figure out what standard was being used to judge some civilizations or some periods of human history as better than others. And I have to confess, I still don't understand that standard.
Would you say that a Oxford style format would have been better?
Well, I don't know. I mean, perhaps if we had a revolution where, I think Oxford has some advantages and disadvantages. There are ways to abuse the Oxford format, especially on the negative side. But I don't know. Perhaps if you really define the heck out of the resolution, it might be better. I don't know. You are obviously running this. I would still like to understand what people thought the standard was that people were using to judge comparatively between civilizations and cultures.
Okay, let me. I think I can bridge the gap between you and Virgilius. I'll set it out, and then I'll see if Virgilius agrees with it, and you follow it. The way I understand it is that when Virgilius was talking to me about this before, the idea is that the nation. So whether it's basically the post-Westphalian nation, I think we agreed on something like that during the debate itself. National sovereignty can be threatened by international bodies. Like, for instance, the European Union is a supranational body that's opening borders of European nations to accept immigrants. Mm-hmm. And the Catholic Church, the way I understood the proposition was, as an international body, acted in ways that were negative to the national sovereignty interests of the states that it was over. And not just like once in a while, but as a net negative. That's how I understood the proposition. Is that a correct framing of it, Virgilius?
Yes, absolutely. Because now that I see it, I think we made the mistake because we were actually judging whether the existence of nations was good or bad and nationalism was good or bad, when the question was specifically if the Catholic Church was pervasive or negative to the sovereignty of the nations, to the good of the nations.
So yeah, whether you agree with the actual proposition, Dave, is the proposition now clear?
So the proposition wasn't. The proposition was that literally the resolution? Maybe I didn't pay enough attention. Was that literally the resolution? Was it sovereignty in the resolution?
The resolution was is the basically, to make it as in as straightforward as possible.
Well, what is the actual quote, if you don't mind me asking?
Is the Catholic Church a net negative to national sovereignty?
That was the literal one.
Yeah, that's.
I still would defend that. I definitely.
Yeah, but does that demystify it?
Okay, I guess it demystifies it. My contention should have been more focused then on making this one point. My approach to this is to compare the Catholic Church to other alternatives that existed in specific times and places during its time and before.
Yeah,
I think it's anachronistic to compare them either to some abstract ideal that's never been implemented, or to compare them to situations that really can only emerge with modern technology.
Yeah. So
that is my contention, because I don't, again, I would certainly say that the Catholic Church was better than the pagan Roman Empire for the sovereignty of nations, and it was certainly better than the Muslim Caliphate for the sovereignty of nations. So to my mind, the comparative dimension, under the comparative dimension, I would still give myself. I don't know if I would still commend the resolution from my side on a comparative thing, even though, in the abstract, in some kind of like pure Platonic form, like the Catholic Church definitely contended for sovereignty with the nations that it encompassed, but I don't even know what that really means ultimately.
So I think we can all agree on the fact that there wasn't prior to the debate, there was not a unified. We both agreed on the term. Everybody agreed on the terms. It was unclear to each side what the terms meant. They each thought they meant something different. So that lack of coming together beforehand to be specific that both sides understood what the terms meant was probably the key mistake of the debate.
Well, I think the problem is not that what the terms meant. The problem was whether it was going to be comparative or absolute.
No, I disagree. I think the terms were definitely the problem. I mean, you guys didn't move forward past what is a nation, essentially.
Yeah, I did ask you, but he just didn't answer.
Well,
actually.
no.
Well,
you were the one that was.
No, I mean prior to the debate, I asked you if you want to discuss terms. You did not.
Well, I didn't have time.
But
I mean, like terms. I mean, like, look. I mean, during the debate, like, I asked you several times what you meant by nations, and I don't feel like I got a very good answer.
But what I meant by nations, I did answer that. In fact, Todd interceded and twice to explain the confusion you were having. But it could either be my fault by explaining,
bringing up antiquity.
But it could either be my fault by explaining. But Todd and I were interceding to explain terms, which we should.
The Westphalian nation does not. The thing is, unfortunately, Virgilus, that doesn't really make sense to the analogies you're using, because you were using ancient analogies. So the definition of the nation couldn't very well be the Westphalian example in the Persian Empire.
No, I didn't use the Westphalian example. I used the French Republic example, the revolution.
Well, you use that along with your ancient examples.
Yes, because it's the, let's say, the most correct expression of national sovereignty.
So we're saying that there was a definition that wasn't consistently used, and I'll acknowledge that, right? But the thing is that the inconsistency of the usage was what made me uncertain about, it's definitely the Westphalian conception, right? You were like, I'm defending the Westphalian conception of the nation, and my examples of nations are the Persian Empire, the Athenian League, and the French Republic. That doesn't make sense to me, because
that was before we had agreed on that. That was the Persia and Athens was before we'd agreed on that. That was when you were hashing it out, and after
that was the majority of the debate by my memory. We didn't even get to the French Republic until like the last.
No, but that's the point. Those were brought up in the sort of groping around portion. And I don't think those would be determinative after the thing was defined. But again, we're not here to relitigate the debate.
Okay, well, fine, fair enough.
We're
Fair enough.
basically on agreement on the structural flaws of the format. Now you have to leave in about 5 minutes, Dave. So
Yeah,
if
I
there's
do.
anything else anybody would like to add, I think we could just wrap it up here. So yeah, I guess thanks for coming on, guys.
Yeah, thanks, guys. See ya.
Bye bye.